Okay, we are live. Hello and good evening. Welcome to everyone whoever is with us tonight. This promises to be a very fascinating discussion because we are talking about someone who is usually not discussed too much in the mainstream political discourse. And there is always this problem of narrative, this labeling, the problem of labeling. So for instance, the moment I announced it on my Facebook page that we are going to have a discussion with Vikram Savarkar, so one Pakistani associate or admirer or friend of us got very angry with us that how come when we keep talking about Subhash Bose, how can we touch Savarkar? So that was the instant reaction. And then, of course, a lot of Bengal leftists uh, uh, suggested that now Anuj and I should start saying Jai Shri Ram instead of Jai Hind and those kind of stuff. So, in a way, that sets the discussion theme for tonight, Vikram, is uh, that for a very significant section of our political discourse, Savarkar remains an untouchable. So I will come back to that theme, but I would like to start the discussion with a personal touch. I mean, I would like to hear from you, and I would like you to tell our readers. I have a few questions when I was going through your book, and the first thing is, I mean, which you make clear, very clear in at the very outset, is that your book is not an apology for Savarkar. You take an objective view, but and in the same breath, you also say that he has been an object of obsession for you. So cutting the emotional ties from an object of obsession. That's the line you have written.
Yeah.
So I mean, what would help our readers to understand is how you personally approached Savarkar as an individual, and then how the historian in you looked at Savarkar. So how did you keep the two things, two entities separate?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Chandrachud. A very good evening. And really, it's a great pleasure to be talking to two people whom I truly admire as authors, as researchers, as dear
Thank
friends,
you.
Anuj and Chandrachud,
Very
for the
much.
kind of work that you have done. I think revolutionized the whole world, which historians in this country did not. And thank God, I mean, once historians enter, I think our tribe ends up ruining a lot of the story. So kudos to you. And yeah, to this question, I mean, you started with him being an untouchable, somebody who all his life fought for the eradication of untouchability, which again would come as a surprise, to people who associate Hindutva with Manuvad and upper caste hegemony, Brahminical patriarchy, and all kinds of terms like that, labels that you mentioned. Here was a man who all his life fought for against untouchability.
Right.
He's a political untouchable today, and literally a persona non grata. At least today, Chandrachud, we are able to sit like this and have a discussion, and none of us
Absolutely.
will have to pay the price for it. But a few decades before, in the 50s and 60s, and even after his death, someone of the eminence of Hridaynath Mangeshkar, who used to tune a lot. The Mangeshkars were very close friends of Savarkar, and Savarkar was also a poet, a Marathi poet, and several of his poems, Jayostute, Shri Mahan Mangale, Shivaspade Shubhade, and Sagara Prana Tadmalala in Marathi, all of these were tuned by Hridaynath Mangeshkarji and sung by the Mangeshkar sisters, including Lataji. Now, just for that sake, that he was tuning poems that were written by Savarkar, Hridaynathji lost his job in the All India Radio. He was sacked, and he mentions that in an interview in ABP Mazha. So that was the kind of calumny where you may, that's what I hold all the time. You may like somebody, you may hate someone, you may associate, like that gentleman who had all those nice things to say about your Facebook post. It's fine. I mean, people may support or oppose a political ideology, but most often it is done without any knowledge about that person, any information about what that person did or what that person stood for. And that is because every year numerous biographies get written on Gandhi, on Nehru, on Patel, on so many people, but and many other heroes of the past. They are continuously being reevaluated and revisited. But Savarkar just escaped this revisitation and reevaluation for a number of reasons. One was, of course, him being the proponent of Hindutva. The second, his complicity, alleged complicity in the Gandhi murder case, and all of that. And by time the narrative was built, the word you use, narrative, that he was almost, such a persona non grata that even talking about him would make people lose their jobs. So today, at least, we are having the occasion to sit. If I write a book on him, I don't have to pay the penalty for that. So, which is a good departure that any democracy, liberal democracy, should at least discuss uncomfortable issues. Every year, several books are written on even Adolf Hitler. So, you should have that objective assessment of characters of the past. For me personally, I'm half a Maharashtrian myself, and so on my maternal side, which is Maharashtrian, there was a lot of talk about him. There was also a lot of talk about the genocide of Maharashtrian Brahmins, including some members of my own mother's family who lost their lives in the aftermath of Gandhi's murder, something that is held as a top secret. Nobody talks about this at all.
Right.
And I talk about it quite openly, and I don't know what awaits me in the second volume, and I'm going to, bring out these details as to it was a chilly, precursor to what happened in Delhi in the anti-Sikh genocide of 1984. Just because Sikhs had murdered Indira Gandhi, the backlash of peace-loving congressmen was on the Sikhs. Similarly, the backlash was faced by the Maharashtrian Brahmins only because Godse, Apte, and all of them were Maharashtrian Brahmins. So there was a lot of talk about this in my family. I wouldn't understand that as a child or as I was growing up, but I was fascinated by this as to, what is this enigma about this man? And not many people spoke too much about it. I think it's still, even now, in fact, when I on social media did a crowdsourcing to get people to talk about it, many people wrote their stories, but they said, please keep our stories anonymous. Still the people who were part of the carnage, their descendants are in positions of power in Maharashtra and in the
Wow.
center. So we would not want to face that because this episode has been whitewashed from history. So that
So
is
the
the
files would be classified still?
there are no files. There were no FIRs. The police refused to file FIRs. It
Oh my God.
almost was made to seem that such an incident never happened. There were scores of
But we do have
lives
newspaper
lost.
reports. We do have newspaper
Kesri.
reports.
Kesri had a few reports, but by and large, the national press, I think they blacked out. The New York Times reported 45 Brahmins were killed in this place and that place. That was also one article which I managed to find, but rest of the time
Okay.
it is not. So there was something about this man, his times, the taboo that was there about him, which finally spurred me, and he came back into full action. I think during the Vajpayee regime when his portrait was unveiled in Parliament, which caused a hullabaloo. Then that memorial plaque in Port Blair, which our dear friend Manishankar Iyer got removed with a lot of fanfare and invectives against Savarkar. So
So
all of that,
just the other day, I was going through this some old volumes of Frontline, and
yeah,
incidentally happened to chance through this special issue of Frontline when Savarkar's portrait was unveiled in Parliament, and N. Ram had specially invited A.G. Nurani to write an article on that. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
what a big farce it is and all. So I mean
correct.
that kind of reaction is the standard reaction that we have seen.
Correct. True. So yeah, I knew I was taking up a very big challenge, but at the same time, most people, I think Savarkar has been wronged by both his proponents as well as his opponents. His opponents would anyway wrong him, but his proponents, those who claim to be his speaking on his behalf, not many have really read a lot of his literature. He wrote so copiously, 6,000 to 8,000 pages of literature in newspapers, in magazines, in plays, in all kinds of articles and everything. And his political ideology, which is tough to assimilate, also place in context because a lot of his ideas were far ahead of his times. So most of them, I think, do a lot of injustice to him, even those who claim to be on his side politically. And that's why an assessment, because many of the things that he had said and propounded, I think would run very tangent to what the ruling dispensation also now would believe or want us to believe, and so on. But then, the objectivity of me as a historian, which I mentioned there, of wanting to cut away this cord, yeah, you do get emotionally attached to your character. You both are so passionate about Netaji. It's natural when you invest so much of your time, your energy, your effort, your money, everything done on your own. Then you do get to become very passionate. But I think a true biography is one where you also bring out the flaws of your character.
Right.
Because like all human beings, these people also had flaws. Today, sitting in air-conditioned rooms, we have the luxury of a retrospective view, saying they could have done this, they could have done that, they should not have said this. But I think with keeping those flaws also in place, which I have done a lot more in the volume 2, where he comes out as a man with warts and all. I think that is very important for any biographer, for the biography to not then become a hagiographical account of just extolling the person, which is what many of his proponents also do. While the A.G. Nurani you mentioned, he goes to the extreme of painting him like a imp of Satan. The other side does the other extreme, that everything he did was perfect and wonderful. So there were flaws, there were mistakes, there were strategic errors, which, like any politician, he also did in his life. So I think a holistic view of all of that is very important to make it an objective biography, in my view.
So you really have focused on the what you perceive, what you see as drawbacks and things that you don't see in the positive light, in the
Yes.
probably could have been done differently, and
Yeah. Yes.
so that's great. So I mean that was the personal part that I wanted to know about.
Yeah.
Now I mean, coming back to the subject, I mean there are obviously huge amount of facts, dates, events, normally the way people want to hear about one individual. But I mean, largely, I mean, to our audience, I would request to read your book, which I think before your book, the major work was many years ago by Dhananjay Keer. And after
Yeah.
Keer's book, I think your book is the
Yes.
objective historian scholarly work. I mean,
Correct.
Keys work, I would say it's a bit of a hagiography, and
Yes.
many unsubstantiated claims made there.
True. In fact,
And
that also was written in the 1960s.
60s,
60
yes,
years, 60 years have passed, and nobody wanted to write about him, despite him occupying headlines every day.
amazing stuff. So, Savarkar being born in 1883, that's, I mean, at a gap of, say, around 14 years younger to Mahatma Gandhi, and about, say, 10, 11 years younger than Aurobindo Ghosh. But, I mean, if we look at the generation, probably he belonged to that early generation of Aurobindo, where the revolutionary movement was gaining some shape. I mean,
Yeah.
although Tilak was an intellectual driving force and inspiration, but he was never into the revolutionary organizations,
Yeah.
the secret organizations,
Yes.
where like Aurobindo was forming and
Yes.
here Savarkar was forming.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was just trying to look at the two schools, the Savarkar's, the Maharashtrian, the Chitpavan Brahmin extremist school, and the Bengal school of revolutionaries, which is the Anushilan Samiti and later Aurobindo's Yugantar.
Mhm.
So there were many commonalities, but
Mm.
in terms of development of thought process and in development of programs, revolutionary programs, there were also remarkable differences. So in Savarkar as an individual, what we see, there are three strands which I could find. One was his very early exposure at the age of 10, 11 to communal conflicts and development of the sense of communality or community, the Hindu's sense of being a Hindu and the Hindu community. At the same time, he is very rational and agnostic. And the third strand that was developing was being anti-British. So if I can assume, if I can say that the exposure to riots and exposure to communal conflicts developed, I mean, it was the driving force for his maturing thoughts about community. What was the trigger point for anti-British feeling, the revolutionary spirit for independence?
That's a great question because in my book I mentioned how his father was a very influential character in his life, where he used to make him read after dinner. They would all sit and discuss, global history. Also exposed him to the Italian revolutionaries, Mazzini and Garibaldi, and all of them, and a revolutionary strand that was not associated with Karl Marx and the Marxist, lineage, but the
Right.
Italian group, and later, Mussolini and others who, also drew inspiration to some way, in some way, from Mazzini and the earlier Young Italy movement. And the I think the tip off point, and in Maharashtra that time, in fact, I opened my book with that whole premise, the volume one, that the Chitpavan Brahmins were a warrior class who just were not uh, able to be subdued by the British. And the British themselves, Lord Lytton writes to the Viceroy, saying this. Sorry, Lord Temple writes to Lord Lytton, the Viceroy, saying,
Right.
whatever we do, the Chitpavan Brahmins will never be assuaged. We won India not from the Mughals but from the Marathas, who held sway over a large part of India. And after 1818, their collapse of power was something that they could never, take up lying down. And that's why constantly there were ferments of revolutionary movements in Maharashtra all through the 19th century. Even, during the 1857 uprising, also the first war of independence, that also had so many Maratha leaders. But after that, also people like Vasudev Balwant Phadke and so on, whose stories as folklore Savarkar was also imbibing. But I think the trigger point was that of the Chafekar brothers, and how the Chafekar brothers, who assassinated the plague commissioner of Pune and were then executed, and that became such a big furor in different parts of Maharashtra and India. And that's what triggered him to take this vow in front of his family deity Bhavani, saying, I'm going to kill the enemy till my last breath, and formed the first organized secret society of the country, which was initially this Rashtra Bhakta Samoha, then became the Mitra Mela, then transformed itself into the Abhinav Bharat, and then moved also outside India to London, and had a very active role to play all over Europe in the first decade of the 20th century. So I think that was the main, uh, tip off point, where, and then the invocation, the similarity with the, Bengal school, where you're invoking the divine feminine, even the
Right.
motherland being seen as Mata, and then Bankim Chandra, Vande Matram, Durga there, Bhavani here, then taking it back to historical figures, Shivaji, and then how Shivaji was given this sword, mythical sword by goddess Bhavani to fight the Mlechas and all of that, and how all these historical narratives and themes then is used, history used as a tool to inspire the present to fight against the oppression of the times. I think that was very cleverly used by Savarkar in his writings those times, and also drawing heavily on the Western philosophers, the utilitarian theory of Spencer and all of that, Weber, Spencer, the revolutionary, this thing of the Italian revolutionaries, as I mentioned, and the local heroes, Shivaji Maharaj being one of the most, a potent symbol, which even Tilak had lionized by then through the Shivaji Jayantis in Maharashtra. And Ramdas, the cultural renaissance, along with political freedom, all of it brought together in a very potent movement.
What
Here,
was his
one.
what was his view? What was his view of Muslims in that formative, this formative years of his? How did he
Right.
view Muslims? Because since he was so keen about 1857 and all that, so he couldn't have avoided. He must
There
have
was
taken everything into consideration.
Yeah, I think, Anush, there was a dichotomy where even in his book, seminal work that he wrote on the first war of Indian independence, the term he coined, till then called the Sepoy Mutiny, after 2 years of research in the British Library and so on, there also he talks about Hindu-Muslim unity and says we are a country. In his speeches in London, he's talking about we are a country like a rainbow, where all Hindus, Muslims, Jains, Buddhists, all of us are different colors. We need to be the same. But in his childhood too, I think that was also the time when, all through the 1890s, as Chandrachud mentioned, the communal riots in different parts of Maharashtra on the issues of cow slaughter, procession in front of mosques, music, and all of that. And even Tilak and Kesari were writing profusively against, this all these communal riots. So as a child, that whole sense of disunity among the Hindus, and how you need to assert yourself, and you need to arm yourself for self-defense. You need not be on an offensive, but you need to be on the defensive always, was something that he did. And that very famous story, which is all the time repeated to calumnize him even today. Oh, as a band of boys, they went and desecrated a mosque. Actually, that was a symbolic thing. It was a decrepit mosque. It was not even in vogue or in worship. It was just that, we go and put our flag there and say, okay, you can't take us for granted. So that sort of a thing was done, which was also the flavor of the times. A lot of Tilak's
Yeah.
writings of the time too, reflects this. The Carl newspaper of S.M. Paranjpe also talks effusively about the need for the Hindu community to unite itself and also provide a defense, which is, I think, a fair enough thing when there's a united onslaught against you as a community, to just say it's okay, that's fine. I mean, we should just allow ourselves to be roughshod. I don't think that's a great approach to have anyway.
Yeah, it's a sign of the times, and it's also that is also a very prominent theme in the writings of Bankim Chandra. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not proper to judge the writings of those times or the thought process of those times sitting in the 21st century.
Correct,
So we can't do that. But one question that I had is about the worldview, the formation of the worldview. Is see, if we look at the Bengal school, when you look at people like Surendranath, when you look at Bipin Chandrapal, Chittaranjan Das, even Aurobindo, their formative years had great exposure to Western thought and Western culture.
Yeah,
Whereas we find Savarkar coming from a small town and stepping out to Nashik when 16, when he was 16, around that
oh,
age.
10, 10, 11, yeah.
10, 11. Okay. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and going to Bombay even later, seeing the
Pune,
big city,
Pune for his Pune for
Pune for
his
the Ferguson
graduation.
College. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, no, before that, I guess he went to Bombay once for some exam or for results or whatever. I mean,
Just
maybe for a brief
brief.
time,
Yeah.
but I mean, experiencing the big city, uh, I mean, the capital of the western side of India,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
big city, and then staying in Pune, living in Pune. So exposure to the big city, the big uh, the thoughts, the philosophy, the culture, and the Western influence that came much later, probably. Would you say that?
I wouldn't say that, because even as I mentioned, even in his village, that's what his father inculcated in him, Damodar Pant Savarkar, who got him English books, and he was a voracious reader, again, much beyond his age, where at a very young age he was actually reading, uh, stories of Napoleon, of the French Revolution, the Italian revolutionaries, the Irish Revolution, all of that, and also Western political philosophies, and also the utilitarian theory. And he was also trying to fuse that, and in fact, he writes about how the Bhagavad Gita was the biggest example of utilitarian theory. Do what is in the best interest for the maximum number of people, even in the means may not always matter, but finally, in the end, if a lot of people are benefited, that is all that should matter. And I think Pune becomes the main, highway for him. But even before that, he was reading this, and most importantly, not only reading it for himself, but in that Mitra Mela meetings on Saturdays and Sundays, he would also read out and give lectures to the others, so that all the other boys who were a part of this movement were also were not only, it was not just a foolhardy attempt of going and bombing someone, killing someone, but also there had to be some intellectual
Right.
input to it, which is what
Right.
we undermine the revolutionary movement all the time, whether it is in Maharashtra or Bengal or any Punjab, that these were all misguided youths who just picked up
Uh,
the gun and just threw a few bombs here and there, and it didn't make any difference. But I think the intellect, the strategy, the coordination between all of them, those things, and the unending strain of that throughout the history of our freedom struggle, that we don't look at all.
No, I think it makes the story of Savarkar all the more remarkable that he was already studying these, reading these, and assimilating. Because these were the kind of literature and discussions that used to take place within secret societies that were already established, formed, and developed. But
Yeah.
here we see a teenager or a late teen is doing it on his own steam. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not being fed into his head, and
Yeah.
then using that to develop his thought process, his intellectual abilities.
Yeah.
So that I think makes him stand out of the crowd and puts him at a very superior level,
and
intellectually
not
at least.
only and not only talking about revolution, freedom, and all that, but also talking of things like widow remarriage. He had written
Right,
poetry in school about how why should it be that only if a woman dies, the man can get married in no time, but then the reverse cannot happen. The lady has to shave her head off, and she has to. So all these type of things he was writing even as a boy of 11, 12, 13, for which he was winning prizes. So, and coming from a orthodox upper caste family, so that also social reforms also somewhere was embedded in this one, and the people of that Mitra Mela were people from all castes, and he actually belonged to a landlord's, the Savar Vadikars, who were Sahukars, who actually had huge havelis and tracts of land and so on. So, but then for a boy of that family to actually sit and you know uh, discuss all this with people of all boys of all other castes, including children of the so-called slave caste and all that. So that it's also somewhere the seed of social reform and equality and justice and all of that was, it seems to have come in right at a very early age.
right, right. So I mean, so he, I mean, quickly just pass over through this phase where
Hmm.
he goes abroad, takes a scholarship from Shamji Krishna Verma, and
Yeah.
spends a few years abroad in London, in Paris, gets involved with the international branch of the Indian freedom movement,
Yeah.
and then gets arrested, comes back. So, I mean, strictly talking from his formative years till 1924,
Yeah.
roughly there are three phases that we can see: that the formative years where he's still there till Ferguson College, and then goes abroad, then gets arrested and comes back and spends time in the cellular jail.
Yeah.
So there are certain transitions which we see. I mean, development as an individual, development as a revolutionary, as a thinker.
Hmm.
So this generation, if I may say so, I mean, after Aurobindo's retirement in 1910, he 1910 11, he goes up to Pondicherry, and that phase of revolutionary movement comes to a close in Bengal, and then till the time it is taken up again by Rasbihari Bose and Jatindranath Mukherjee, Baga Jatin, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that generation.
Yeah.
But by that time, Savarkar is already in jail. So
Yeah.
his first phase of revolutionary career also ends more or less simultaneously with that of Aurobindo.
Yes. True.
And so then he goes to jail. So what happens in jail? I mean, what are the years? What is what? How does his mind work when he is in jail in Andamans? And what are his? I mean, if there was any forward-looking view, how was his intellect developing? How was his worldview changing? What was the evolution happening there?
Hmm. Before we come to the jail, Chandrachud, I think it's important that we also, I mean, he was almost the unelected leader of India House in London, and so the other revolutionaries who were working with him, they kept in touch with him almost through their lives. Whether it was Virendranath Chattopadhyay, whether it was Lala Hardayal, and the Gadaris, they, even while he was in jail, there was, I mentioned in the book how during the First World War there was all this attempt to attack India, the
Right.
same thing which INA later did, attack India from both sides. The
Absolutely.
same constant theme of how to liberate India was spreading through those 6, 7 decades. And they also attacked Madras. They wanted to overrun Port Blair, take, and the list that was confiscated. You mentioned that the top two names in that list who had to be liberated from cellular jail were the two Savarkar brothers, Vinayak and his elder brother Baba Rao, who was also in the same jail. So, and then VVS Iyer and all of them who were there with him in London. VVS Iyer also comes away to India. He settles down in Pondicherry. but he's constantly the revolutionaries. I think they just went silent or they went underground, but the ferment was always there. Whether it is Sachindranath Sanyal too, who then becomes the bridge between Savarkar and Raj Bihari Bose,
Right.
and gets the two of them together. So that ferment never went. I mean, how you may not be actively involved in the movement for various reasons, which we can discuss, but that connection throughout, I think, remained, and that's why even after independence, when in 1952, when the Abhinav Bharat he finally dissolves in Pune, saying now we have one freedom, so there is no more need of all these revolutionary movements. The big photo that is behind him is of Subhash Chandra Bose, and he says we need to pay our respects to this man because of whom we have won our freedom. So, so
In fact, there was a recording of his. Some, I don't know which year they recorded it. So he
52,
paid
yeah,
probably that time, and he paid
yeah,
compliments to contributes to all the freedom fighters, and
yeah,
he's said his Hindi was not perfect, but he said
yeah,
कि जो भी 80-57 के उसके लेकर जितने भी वो हो गए चले गए हमारे देश में, तो he specifically mentions Netaji's name. He mentions nobody
yeah,
else's name. So
correct,
that's
correct,
very touching to he is taking the name of every. I mean, he's talking about this entire 57 onwards, the
yeah,
entire freedom
yeah,
struggle, and he
yeah,
chooses to name only Subhash Chandra Bose.
correct. But in the jail, I mean, Chandra, to your question, the jail, it was we all know. I mean, some of your listeners may not, but then we know that the conditions in that jail was not like what it was in the Aga Khan Palace or anywhere else, where this was backbreaking, where the worst of human tortures that were meted to the prisoners,
And so many went
where
insane. People like
insane,
Ulaskar Dutt
Ulaskar
went
Dutt,
mad.
Hindu Bhushan
Vikramji,
Roy,
this
who
was a question
committed.
I wanted to actually ask you. This was a one question that आपको पता है क्योंकि बहुत से लोग को आपने बोला कि आगा खां पैलेस में क्या हालत थी सवरकर जी को जो टॉर्चर किया था उसके बारे में बताइए आपने उस दिन अपने हम जो आपका लेक्चर सुने थे एक बार
जी, जी,
तो आपने बताया था कि हाउ एग्जैक्टली ही वाज टॉर्चर्ड दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट नो बिकॉज जिन लोगों को बैठ के आगा खां पैलेस में पूरी सारी सहूलतें मिल रही हैं तो
जी,
पीपल शुड नो द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द काइंड ऑफ लाइफ ही लेड एंड
जी.
तो क्या है
Sure.
व्हाट एग्जैक्टली डिड दे डू टू हिम
So, the basic human facilities which a prisoner of war needed to be given, like clean food or drinking water or toilet facilities, that also not being given to not only his Savarkar but most of the other prisoners. He was, of course, put in a very exclusive double, gated prison because the British always categorized him as a D category or a dangerous criminal. And in my book also I mentioned how even Churchill and others on their notings they've said this man has to be extradited to India and has to not be in any mainland prison but far away from the mainland in Port Blair in Kalapani. So the food that was given to most of them, it would be basi khana, कीड़े मकोड़े, pieces of reptiles and all of that in them. उसको खा के बहुत सारे लोगों को डायरिया हो जाता था, and but there were fixed timings to go to the toilets, and so in the absence of I mean, if you have diarrhea and if you have to visit the toilet more often, most of the prisoners had to defecate in their own cells, urinate, defecate, standing handcuffs for weeks on end. So most of the body functions done that, and sitting amidst your own squalor, sitting, eating, sleeping in cells like that, which were cramped, which were hardly, of any dimension. Even now, if you see the Port Blair Savarkar cell, it's a cramped space. And his cell, he was put in solitary confinement for several months, where 6 months there was no human contact at all. His cell was overlooking the gallows, where every day you were seeing people, being taken to be hanged. That was the only human contact you had. So every way to kind of break the spirit, and the most inhuman practice of the Kolhuka bell, where every day instead of the bell, the freedom fighter would be yoked to the grinding mill, and you had to extract about 30 pounds of oil in the blazing heat of Port Blair, and not even water given to you if you fainted and fell there. And the water that was given also was this saltish sea water, which would not quench your thirst. And most often, the gunny sacks that they would wear, it would cause skin rashes, leeches, and all kinds of, all that island mein jo insects and parasites and all that, those affecting you, but none of them getting any kind of medical treatment. And that's why one entire asylum was also started in Port Blair in Haddo Island, because so many of them were going insane. There were about 100 plus revolutionaries, only 3 from Maharashtra, the majority from Bengal.
देखो
And later then the whole Punjab revolutionaries come. Then of course South India, other parts also, but majority Bengal and Maharashtra. It was the two Savarkar brothers only, and then Vaman Rao Joshi who was there. So and not even the facility to read and write. So when we talk of intellectual development, there's no facility. First of all, this kind of inhuman conditions, and then also not even paper to write, pen to write. And this man was a poet, and I think he used poetry as a means right from the time his mother died. Whenever he was faced with, I think, any problems in life, including when he was caught back when he jumped out in France and tried to escape. On coming back, he writes this poem, Anadimi, Anantami. I'm infallible, I'm not Ajar hu, Amar hu, that sort of a thing. Almost as a scoff to the British that you can capture my body, but you can't capture my soul. So even in the jail, he used to write poetry with the nails on the walls of the cell, and 6,000 verses of Marathi
Right.
poetry, Kamala, Saptarshi, and all of that, which that fellow, the jailer Barry, who was this inhuman guy, he used to, just to spite him, he would come and whitewash the walls so that all the poetry is erased. And that is, but he didn't know that this man had such a elephantine memory. All the poems were memorized, and when he came out of jail, these poems again got published. We have not lost them to posterity. It's still there for us to this one. So and he also writes in his memoirs, Maji Janma Tape, My Transportation for Life, that there were several occasions where he also wanted to commit suicide because there was no, and that is one thing about his writings, is he's candid about his own, the lows of his life, what he felt, including in one, this one he says, there was this talk by the people outside the jail, all the soldiers and all those people standing there, that Mahatma Gandhi is this amazing supernatural power. Whenever the British capture him, in no time he comes out of the jail. So he has some power. So they didn't know why he was coming out, obviously, striking deals and coming out. But the thing was, they thought people can't even capture him. He's such a spiritual force. Similarly, this Bada Babu who's staying inside, he was always called Bada Babu. He swam for 4 days and, in the seas, and then went to France. And then he used to tell them, not 4 days, I just swam for 10 minutes. Yeah, I mean, it went to, and then his own image in front of all of them of his bravery and valor would come down. So he was quite self-effacing that way. This one, he writes about those petitions also in his own, memoirs and all of that. But from that sort of a condition of inhuman tortures to actually usher in jail reforms, where in the same jail you have, a library started. There are classes held where he becomes this master who's also conducting classes where he says language is the best way to unite people. So the Bengali prisoner would teach all the others his language. He would teach Marathi, Gujarati to the others. Hindi is taught to all the people. South Indian languages. All of this discussed among each other, and also this whole idea that we should have one language, common language for the country, and that should be Hindi. And then also in the jail, the whole that community feeling that you mentioned, Chandrachud, getting consummated there, I think, a lot more because of the treatment that the Hindu prisoners were getting at the hands of the Muslim Jamadars. And just very easy it was with this kind of torture, the Jamadar would, first of all, the Hindu prisoners were not allowed to keep any symbol of their religion. The Muslim prisoners could still sport a cap or have their dadi, they could do their prayers. Whereas the Hindus, the first thing they would do is cut off their sacred thread. You could not wear tilak, you could not have any of all of that. And the idea was, you just feed them a little beef and say, Aaj se tum Musalman ho. And then you change the name. It's not that you know about the Quran or the Prophet or you know about the tenets of the religion. You've just changed your name and brought to the other side with the promise that you will not be tortured as severely. So when you're going through this kind of treatment, Are yaar, Ram bolo, Allah bolo, you just get out of this hellhole. So it's fine. So most of them would cross over. Now later on, if they wanted to come back, the Hindu community itself was so against this, saying dharam bhrasht ho gaya, jati bhrasht ho gaya, we will not let them sit. So he writes in his memoirs how there were separate kitchens for the Hindu and Muslim prisoners and separate rows where they would sit. Where he says forbidden food was eaten, so probably some beef or something was served to the Muslim prisoners. He said every day there would be more and more people who would whom we would spot on the
To
other
the other
side,
side.
from our side. And so this allurement, and he writes there also, if someone converts out of their conviction and so on, we have no problem. But out of allurement, inducement, or coercion, that is one number less for us. And these people then are registered as Muslims in the register. They will marry, and then their entire family, you've lost one entire family from your fold. So that was what he was against, which further brought him this whole idea of Shuddhi movement in the jail, inspired by Arya Samaj and Swami Dayanand Saraswati, saying those of them who repented and wanted to come back, can't we have a system to reconvert them and bring them back? So that ritual was also done, Tulsi water given, and a few verses of Ramcharitmanas and all that to bring them back to the Hindu fold. And of course, the biggest intellectual, I think, curdling that happened in jail was the writing of the treatise Essentials of Hindutva and Who is a Hindu, which he did in 1923, just a year before he came out of jail. The trigger point, I argue, is along with what he saw in jail, was also the Khilafat movement that was going on in the country, which brought religion into politics for the first time in a very, very dangerous and a very perversive manner, where a premium was put to the support of one community to participate in the freedom struggle based on communal lines of their matters of faith. And when that did not happen, where they were all, I mean, the Gandhi had promised that within 1 year you will get both Swaraj as well as the Khilafat will be established in Turkey. Now, neither of it happened in 1 year, 1918 to 1919. So, but then those who were batting for Swaraj did not mind, but those who had been unleashed for the Khilafat, they went berserk, and the communal genocides that happened all over India, starting from the Mokla carnage in Malabar in 1921, in Kohat, in Panipat, in Delhi, Calcutta, in different parts of Bengal, all of that. And during the response of Gandhi towards all of this, and the Congress, and Gandhi in particular, was, where he says the Moklas are brave patriots who are fighting for the cause of their religion. When thousands and thousands of Nair men, women, and children were slaughtered in broad daylight, when Swami Shraddhanand is assassinated by Abdul Rashid, he says, I do not consider him as an assassin. He is my dear brother, Abdul Rashid. So we should get into the psyche of the assassin. We should not calumnize the assassin. So I don't know why his followers did not call my dear brother Godse and not go and kill the Maharashtrian Brahmins. But then all of this, I think, needed an intellectual response where, the Hindu community was almost being led like a Pied Piper. And with the death of Tilak, the Congress virtually fell into the lap of Gandhi after 1920. And though there were pressure points, a little like Motilal Nehru and others who initially tried all the Swarajya party and all of that, but Gandhi somehow managed to win them over also by giving his son the presidentship and all of those things that happened. So
actually, the challenge virtually disappeared with the death of Chittaranjan Das, because from 1921 to 1925 till his death in June 1925. During that period, Gandhi was virtually sidelined by Chittaranjan with the help of Motilal. Motilal played a secondary supportive role to Chittaranjan, but Chittaranjan virtually won the war and had Congress under his control. Right. And Gandhi retired more or less. He was more into constructive work than in the political side of Congress. But Chittaranjan's death completely changed the equation, and Gandhi got Bengal under his thumbs. And with most of the Bengal revolutionaries being in Mandalay at that time, in Burma, in exile, he had a free run.
गांधी फिल्म बनाई थी एटनबरो की, उसमें सियार दास का रोल भी था कोई कि नहीं था?
नहीं,
तिलक का रोल था?
नहीं, उसमें गांधी, नेहरू, पटेल
कर दिए, सुभाष को भी साइलेंट किया, सियार दास को भी साइलेंट किया, तिलक को भी साइलेंट कर दिया। सिर्फ महात्मा गांधी का ही वो लोग हो जाएंगे। सबसे कमाल की बात ये कि
all the pains were there, so
सारा बैकग्राउंड देखने के बावजूद भी अभी आजकल का जो बीजेपी और आरएसएस की गांधी भक्ति से मैं देख के हैरान हूँ। अभी थोड़े दिन पहले उन्होंने संघ के हेडक्वार्टर में वहाँ पे नागपुर में वो गुरुजी की समाधि के सामने कवाली कराई है गांधी के नाम की। कैन यू बिलीव दैट? कवाली टाइप बना करके वहीं उनकी समाधि स्थल के सामने गांधी जी का कोई कसीदा पढ़ा।
So anyway, to come back to this the thing. So if so, he wrote his treatise on Hindutva after he was back to Ratnagiri. After he was back to Ratnagiri,
In the prison, not
in the prison, yes,
released. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, in the prison. So it was a book which that means that he has been thinking about it for all these many years and developing his thoughts. It was not something that he would think and write in a few months.
Yes, yes,
He would have been thinking about it, developing his lines of argument and a system of
yes.
a theoretical framework,
Yeah,
so as to say.
yeah,
So this comes out after his return to India. Now, obviously, I mean, the I'll have to get back to the controversy, the most contentious issues, the branding of Savarkar. One of the key brandings of Savarkar, that घुटने टेक दिए, घुटने टेक दिए, he genuflected, clemency, माफी मांग लिया, माफ कर दो. So he left his revolutionary mindset. He quit his revolutionary ideology and became a constitutionalist and a pacifist. So he wouldn't, from his violent revolutionary ways to a non-violent constitutional means, the transformation was complete, which even Gandhiji wrote in his response to Narayan Rao. And so that he highlights that thing that Savarkar Vinayak Damodar has left the old ways of violent revolution and has moved to peaceful, non-violent constitutional means. So there is virtually no case for the British government to hold him back in prison. So what is this story of genuflecting? Because that is how the branding of Savarkar, and I think A.G. Noorani's contribution is immense in this. The way he has hammered this point again and again and built this case. So how do you deconstruct this whole thing?
yeah. So that is something I have been trying for a long time, but it just doesn't work because again and again the same thing anyway keeps coming. But then I always say in Hindi when people say maafi nama, I say it's not a maafi nama, it's a yachika. Petition is it was not a. In fact, in my book, including the in the appendix, all the petitions, including those filed by his wife and brother and everything, have put it as it is. Some of them, the originals which I got from the British Library in London, the 1917 petition is never quoted for obvious reason that I shall state by most people. All of that I have put, and one can see nowhere in that is he asking for is he saying I'm sorry for what I did or it's a maafi because including when the British come and interview him, Reginald Craddock, the home from the Home Department comes and talks to all the revolutionaries were lodged there because there was all this talk that Savarkar and his elder brother were doing bomb manufacture even in Port Blair, and that sent alarm to Delhi. And they sent people to say, what is the problem that you guys are having? And so in his official report, I mean, the British were not a friend of his. So in a official report, Craddock would not say, I had a extensive interview with Savarkar, and he shows no remorse or repentance for whatever he did, in his earlier role as a revolutionary. And this petition business was not exclusively a facility given only to him. It was a facility given to all the prisoners of war, not only in India, but colonies across the world, especially during the First World War time and when, Emperor George V ascended. As a matter of goodwill, you would have a royal proclamation. So when the war ended, all the Congress people who were lodged in jails for the, non-cooperation movement, they were all released as a matter of goodwill. That, okay, chalo, emperor is coming to India, so in his honor, even now, on some big occasion or something, we release
Yeah.
a lot of prisoners as goodwill. So that, and to do that, there has to be someone has to say, I am the prisoner. So that is a petition you lodge saying, I am so and so, I have been lodged from so and so, I have already served so much of my sentence. And he was given a sentence of 50 years, not 2 transportations for lives, the harshest punishment that other than execution which anybody got. 25 years of one transportation. So he was jailed in 1910. So if he would have come out in 1960 at the age of 76 or something, if he survived that. And so all the time, even in Craddock says, and if you see his petitions, it very clearly, like a good lawyer that he was in London, he argues his case, saying, "Can you please, clarify on our role? I mean, our position. Are we a common convict? They were common, most dreaded convicts of rape and murder and all of that who were there, who were also given some facilities. After 6 months, they would be given remission, or they could bring their families and settle down in the settlements. They could write letters to
They
their
have
family."
actually settled down there. They
Yes,
have
yes,
many
yes.
convicts
Many of them.
families, and they are the ones who supported the British in the Second World War.
Yeah,
And today,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they make different kind of claims. The Japanese came and tortured us and all that. So these are
Correct.
the families of the convicts, because
Convicts.
people have this kind of illusion that only freedom fighters were there in Kalapani.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. There were
there
other.
were
There were
also
other.
convicts.
Correct,
Convicts are
correct.
also the other, murderers and thugs and all kind of,
Huh.
yeah.
True. So
So
those.
I know, Vikram, you have talked about this point in your book. You have written about it. You explained it. But for the benefit of our viewers tonight, I want
Yeah.
to flag it out, this specific point, because I think this is a very, very important point, which you said that for being released, even on the occasion of the king's ascension to the throne, and a new Government of India Act being proclaimed. So, as a goodwill gesture, so many prisoners, including Trailokonath Chakraborty,
Yeah.
Sachindranath Sanal, they were all released and sent back.
Correct. And
But
Sachindranath
you,
Sanyal himself, no, Sachindranath Sanyal himself wrote a petition. And in his Mera Bandi Jeevan, he writes that I was advised by Savarkar to write a petition. And I wrote a petition, हूबहू उन्होंने जैसे लिखा था मैंने भी वैसा ही एक petition लिखा. मुझे रिहाई मिली पर उन दोनों को नहीं मिला, क्योंकि their release would rekindle the revolutionary fire in Bombay presidency which had come down. And in the 1917 petition that I mentioned, he clearly says in that, among the other things, that if my name constitutes an obstacle to the release of all the other prisoners, then omit my name and release the others. And that would give me as much pleasure as my own release would do. So somewhere he was also acting as a spokesperson for many of these young, revolutionaries, Bengal and Punjab, who were probably did not even know how to write English and so on. So that they would look up to him as their leader, the Bada Babu that he was. Vilayati hai, wahan se law padh ke aaya hai, so he will be able to negotiate on our behalf. So that respect with which he was held, even in Ulaskar Dutt's memoirs, he says when he goes mad also, in his madness, he sees that Savarkar is this macho man who's coming and boxing Barry, the jailer, and all that. So that was the awe in which most of the other prisoners held him in. So he was not arguing only for himself, but also on behalf of the other prisoners, which is what comes to light. So when we look at the accounts of contemporaries, we look at the accounts of the British, then we look at the petitions that were filed by other, Ram Prasad Bismil and the whole Kakori case. I mean, they did not file themselves, but then people like Madan Mohan Malviya and several others filed a petition for them. So this was a very common practice. It was, I don't know, now we make such a hue and cry of it. And very interestingly, the same people who say, Yaqub Memon and Kasab and all these Naxals and others, they should be given clemency. They should go right up to the President of India for pardon before execution. That is okay. That is human rights. But our forefathers who went through such tortures, if they filed a petition and wanted to come out, now what is the common equivalence is, but Bhagat Singh did not file a petition. But Bhagat Singh was executed. Now, as a prisoner, he cannot choose his punishment. If Bhagat Singh was given 50 years of imprisonment, would he have filed a petition or not? We don't know. Similarly, if Savarkar was executed, one shot mein khatam, then maybe he would have accepted it. But when 50 years of your entire life, your Javani, the peak of your life, you are going to rot in jail in that condition, there is no point. Instead, he would always advise, kuch bhi karke wahan se nikal jao. And even Sachindranath Sanyal gave those false assurances that I will not participate in politics anymore. I will not. But he came out and did his HRA, the Kakodi case. Again, he comes back to jail. So this kind of false assurances they would give. Ki, we are going back to normal, life, and we will not participate. But many of them would continue. Whether Savarkar did or not, we can see that.
but
Then,
other than Sachindranath Sanal, did you find anybody else filing a petition?
Barin Ghosh, Aurobindo
Baran
Ghosh's
Ghosh did.
brother, yeah, and mentioned several others who were released from the Bengal, this one, who all filed petitions and got out. And every year
They
they
did
were
file
given this
petitions.
chance. They did file. The jailer
So
was
these are
having
the
alarms.
final points which are never brought out in the discussions, which are never highlighted. People are never informed about these
Correct.
things. It's just that's how branding works. That you'll see Savarkar. There is this man. He apologized, whereas he didn't. He apologized and he asked for forgiveness because he wanted to come out. So that's
And
how
what is
branding is done.
what is the reason for that? They will in Twitter in 140 characters you Photoshop that. I mean, not Photoshop, cut out that your most humble obedient servant or something like that. I mean, Baba Re, that was the protocol of
Standard
writing to the
language,
British. Yeah, your
standard business language.
highness, your excellency, your this and that. And even Gandhi's
That's standard
letters
language.
talk like that. Your most humble obedient servant. That's how you address the viceroy or the governor and all that. That
Exactly.
cannot be said that he meant that I'm your servant and from tomorrow I'll be sweeping your house. So that's a little too much of an extrapolation which we do with too much of simplicity. So that's sad.
वो
No,
एक्चुअली
that's
यहाँ पे बहुत नजर आती है हमारे उसको नेताजी को लेकर के. अभी कोई मुझे हमने अनाउंस किया कि फेसबुक ट्विटर में कि हम लोग आने वाले. So people are making the same. So I have never been able to understand this thing. For many people in Bengal, because I keep visiting, as you know, Calcutta, I find people don't like Savarkar. I mean, that's what they claim, and the reason being, according to them, Netaji has criticized him in his book. That's okay. If that's that, so Netaji has only really, taken a pot shot at Savarkar that he wanted both the Muslim League and Savarkar and Jinnah. They were thinking in a narrow sense, so to speak. But if I were to see what Netaji has written about Mahatma Gandhi, that is an entirely different league. The kind of language he has used for the Congress working command. They go and lick the feet to the British. Gandhi is always compromising with the British. I mean, he has run Gandhi, left, right, and center. तो वहाँ किसी को प्रॉब्लम नहीं है कि सुभाष चंद्र बोस महात्मा गांधी की तो पैंट खोल दे, लेकिन वहां कोई टेंशन नहीं है. हाँ, लेकिन गांधी सावरकर को हल्का सा क्रिटिसाइज कर दिया, उस पर लेके सारा बंगाल का इंटेलेक्चुअल क्लास जो है सावरकर के पीछे पड़ गया कि साहब
I will come to that point. That's a very important point, particularly in the context of Bengal politics. We'll come to that.
With Bengal only, I should point out that the other thing that is done is he used to take pension. So in fact, in my second volume, I bring out that all the revolutionaries who were given out remission, set out on remission, the government would, especially those who had to, very severe cases who were then given pardon and who came out, Savarkar included, their degrees were taken away. Savarkar, though he did his law degree, he had his bachelor's degree from Ferguson College in Pune, all of that was taken away from him. So on paper, he was just a metric pass. He could not practice law. So source of income, source of livelihood, nil. Not only for him, but for the others. So till the time they established themselves, or till the time they could not participate in anything like politics or something to have a livelihood, the British government was giving pension to even the revolutionaries in Bengal as high as 150 rupees per month. There are accounts which I put in the second volume. And in fact, there is a lot of debate about how when Savarkar's case comes, he comes out of jail in 1924, but the pension he receives is only 1929, because his initial condition that was there was for 5 years you should stay away from politics of all kinds, and you will be confined only to Ratnagiri district, and you can't go outside that. Now in 1929, if he had sold out, the British would not have kept him continued from 5 years to 13 years that his Nazarbandi was extended to. You are our stooge, so why should I keep you in house arrest? You can be happily free and help us in public. This thing, and you can't. He writes repeatedly, "I'm already a trained lawyer. Can I practice at the bar?" No, you cannot do that. So he writes for different newspapers, Kirloskar magazine, for Kesari. He starts his own Shraddhanand, which his younger brother Narayan Rao does in honor of Swami Shraddhanand. There also he has to write in a pseudonym, because the British say anything, every little bit is under surveillance. Every speech he talks, everything he gives is constantly, there are spies who are looking at what he says, and report goes to the Bombay presidency and to should we extend his or send him back to Kalapani because he has breached the terms of the release. So when it was only in 1929, from while the other revolutionaries were getting 150 rupees, so there are official reports which say, please assess how much is the monthly expense of the Savarkar family. By then they had already had children and all that. So how much is the expense? So the family gives something 125 or 150 rupees but then that is further reduced to 100 rupees. Finally, when the amount comes to him, it's only 60 rupees a month. So while the others were, it was almost less than, half of what the others were actually getting. And that pension too came only till the time he got into active politics, which was 1937. So between 1929 and 1937, when there was no other source of income, when there was no option for livelihood, when you could not even write in your own name, because he writes about untouchability, someone will create a furor. He writes about Hindu-Muslim things, someone will create a furor. Then what are you supposed to write? So that is the problem that they face, and that is the context in which we should see this whole pension business also. And as I said, if by then you have completely sold out to the British, then they would have given him a good position in the government and made him an officer. Chalo, you give us information about all the revolutionaries, act as a double agent, because the Savarkar family was constantly in touch with the revolutionaries, be it Bhagat Singh, be it Chandrasekhar Azad, be it Durga Bhabhi, all of them. And we can talk about that also. So, and then of course, Sachindranath Sanyal, through him, through to Raj Bihari Bose and ultimately Netaji. So that link with all the revolutionaries continued to remain even while he was in Ratnagiri. And there too, I mean, the kind of misinformation that is spread. Oh, but he was so narrow-minded that when the Kakori case, the people were hanged. He did not even mention Ashfaqullah Khan because he was a Muslim. That is the biggest travesty of truth, because he wrote an entire article in Shraddhanand called Jantecha Pyara Ashfaq. I forget the date, some 15th December 1925 or something, which is, he writes an entire article. Now, despite that, that's in Marathi, that doesn't come out in the mainstream media. So you say, oh, he never wrote about Ashfaq. When Jatin Das died of hunger strike, and just as Subhash Chandra Bose went hammer and tongs about Gandhi's silence on the hunger and how he died, the other person who literally hammered Gandhi in the Shraddhanand was Savarkar, saying, "Wo to Abdul Rashid is pyara, your dear brother, but Jatin Das is not your dear brother." Someone who is a young boy who has died, and because of whom the whole category of prisoners in the jail, class A, class B, class C, that extra privileges that political prisoners got, should you not see? So constantly he was this intellectual hammer and tongs against everything that Gandhi was doing. I think he was obsessed maniacally with what Gandhi was writing, and he had to rebut it. Every article of his in the Shraddhanand was a rejoinder to Gandhi. There is an entire publication called Gandhi Gondad, which in Marathi means the confusion of Gandhi. How his stands kept changing, kabhi ye, kabhi wo. You support the Boer War, you support the Zulu. You support the British against the Zulu massacre, but still you are non-violent.
This is
You
a book
praise
or a series of articles?
series of articles which has been compiled into a book in the Savarkar
Acha.
Samuddra called Gandhi Gondad. So he posited himself as an intellectual and ideological opponent to Gandhi, and what is wrong in that? I mean, we needed,
So that
and in the
brings me
Congress.
back to the question, Vikram, is the other part of the clemency issue, where he gives an undertaking or he promises the government that he will leave the revolutionary mindset and he will take a peaceful, non-violent constitutional path. Why would he give such an undertaking? I mean, that's
Yeah,
the blunt question that is posited, that is thrown at everybody
yeah.
or anybody who's talking about Savarkar in any
But
discussion.
that was the thing, that even as I said, Sachindranath Sanyal also said, I'm going to relinquish all kind of public life. I am not going to, but nobody followed it. He 4 years after leaving that, he formed the HRA. Now in this man's case, he didn't do it overtly, but as I said, covertly they were, because the terms, the terms of restriction were much more stringent on him. Uh, he could not even leave, even when plague hit Ratnagiri, he could not leave Ratnagiri and go anywhere else, because that was the kind of fierce surveillance that was put on him. But despite that, as I said, the day before, 2 days before Chandrasekhar Azad actually shoots himself, Savarkar's elder brother Baba Rao, who was like his conduit with the revolutionaries, he meets Azad for several hours in Kashi, in the house of a pandit there. big sum of money is given to him to carry on the revolutionary activities. And then when the Pandit comes, he is told that, ये बहुत बड़ा आदमी है, इनको इनके पैर छो. Then he is told that he is Chandrasekhar Azad. And Durga Bhabhi and the whole group, they come to Bombay, and you have the Lamington shooting case, where there are other people of the Abhinav Bharat who are still associated with the Savarkar brothers. So it was a Jekyll and Hyde thing that he was playing. By the day, you were also this social reformer who was talking about intercaste dining, intercaste marriage, Patit Pavan Mandir, where people of all communities could come in and all that. But covertly, you were writing articles in support of the revolutionaries in the Shraddhanand and all of that, questioning Gandhi's silence, and also providing all this support to the revolutionaries, either him or his two brothers, all the three brothers. Durga Bhabhi, when they come to Bombay, they stay in Narayan Rao's house, and in fact, she disguises herself as a Maharashtrian lady, and Narayan Rao's wife, and in fact, Ranjit Savarkar, who is the grand nephew, he did mention that his grandmother said she taught Durga Bhabhi to wear that 9-yard sari and a nath and all of that, so that she could pass off as a Maharashtrian woman in this one. And after the Lamington shooting case that they did, they all got caught, and so all the things started getting unraveled slowly for all of them.
So it was the anti-British movement or the anti-British activities was always there, even at Ratnagiri, as an undercurrent. It would never come to the surface. Nobody would know about it. But the network was always alive, and the interactions, exchanges were continuously happening.
If it was not, then why would even Bhagat Singh, in all his papers, he has quoted Savarkar and calls him, the title Veer Savarkar is how he addresses him all the time, and says he was such a brave man, revolutionary, but a soft-hearted poet who would not even walk on the grass, so that the grass is is pained. So that is the contradiction. On the one hand, he's a firebrand revolutionary. On the other hand, he's a soft-hearted poet. This is what Bhagat Singh writes in his paper. And Savarkar pays the compliment back. There's lots of eulogizing articles about Bhagat Singh, and also after he's executed, he writes an entire poem on him. Ha, Bhagat Singh, ha. So that poem is sung by all the children in Ratnagiri, and they go all around the place, chanting this in honor of him. And on his house during that week, he puts a black flag as protest. Against the execution of all the revolutionaries, Sukhdev, Rajguru. Sukhdev and Rajguru, the Rajguru being the Maharashtrian in the group, his links also with Savarkar, with Baba Rao, how he also actually was, for 1 year, he also was in the RSS Shakha in Nagpur to get some training. So all of that is also something that I bring out in the second volume. I think, the revolutionary movement, when it splintered, there was, of course, a part which we always talk about, which was the Marxist, communist kind of a thing. One branch probably went off into the Congress. Some of them were still there as undercurrents, but some of them got Gandhiized and non-violence and all of that. The other branch, which we never talk of, is the Hindu nationalist branch, which continued to work, which is never given the importance that the other two branches are given. The middle branch, which was the revolutionaries within the Congress, were the ones who made 1942 Quit India such a bloody, violent movement, completely different to what Gandhi would have wanted it to be. So these three
Gandhi disowned it. Gandhi and Congress disowned the Quit India.
Yeah, they said we are ashamed.
They disowned it.
Decades of hammering non-violence does not get into the minds of people and all of that. So
they disowned it as long as the Britishers blamed them. And when the Britishers stopped blaming them, they started owning it up. Then they started saying that we have done such a good work.
It was a great revolution. Before that, Gandhiji
but
wrote
yes, you are right. In the sense that, M.N. Roy is the contemporary of Savarkar at the same time, who goes to the left. And so is Barindranath Chattopadhyay.
Dange.
Dange.
And Dange writes a petition too. How many people in the CPM will say, okay, our ancestor was also somebody who wrote a petition. He also wrote a similar petition saying, get me out of jail, I won't participate in politics. So
Amazing stuff. That's amazing stuff, really. And that's a very interesting point you made just now, Vikram. Is the split, ideological split into three different streams: the left, uh, communist, Marxist, socialist stream, and on the right you have the Gandhian Congress stream, where many hardcore extremist Bengali revolutionaries later became uh, uh, big Gandhi Bhakts and Nehru Bhakts even. I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, when Subhash Bose started his political career, one of the senior revolutionaries who gave him training and introduced him to the way of the revolutionary societies was Surendra Mohan Ghosh. Surendra Mohan Ghosh later became Subhash's sworn enemy and the
Yeah.
uh, official Congress, state Congress president. And in the 1960s, we see his letter writing to Nehru, praising him as an avatar of Krishna and Buddha. So, so
Yeah, I
that's
got the
the
letter. I have that letter.
See,
Never seen any bigger chamcha of Nehru on my life.
so this is the deviation that we have seen. So the left is good. The Congress is, of course, the official, so has to be good. So the bad guys are the ones who take the nationalistic middle route.
yeah.
And here in this split up of ideology, what strikes me most is that although Savarkar is close or getting ideological support from the likes of Sukhdev, Rajguru, Bhagat Singh, and they admire him, given Savarkar's anti-caste stand, why wouldn't there be a partnership or a collaboration with someone like an Ambedkar?
Mm. That's a very pertinent question because in those 13 years, I think the laboratory, social laboratory that he made Ratnagiri into, putting all those lofty theories in that Hindutva book saying everyone should unite and it's a cultural and identity marker of being a Hindu and not the religion. The untouchable Ganpati, where Ganeshotsav is done by people of all communities together, co-education where children of all castes, including so-called untouchables, sit with the upper caste and study. Intercaste dining, the first intercaste dining cafe comes up in Ratnagiri in a time when even among the Maharashtrian
Yeah.
Brahmins, the Deshasthas and the Chitpavans would not sit together and eat because the Deshasthas would consider the Chitpavans as ye Iran se aaye hain, they are all this thing. They don't, they're of, and they were from the coastal side, so some of them ate fish and all of that. So with so many eating habits that were different, to start a cafe for which he faced immense amount of opposition from the orthodoxy. The first temple in India which was thrown open to people of all castes, the Patit Pavan Mandir in 1931 in Ratnagiri. And he writes several times to Ambedkar saying, you please come here, you see for yourself what we have achieved here is like a pilot project. We can scale this up, nationally, and in 10 years we can eradicate the scourge of untouchability and caste system from this country. Ambedkar writes several times back to him. Somehow he never wants to share stage with him till he is actually officially released from Ratnagiri. Because Ambedkar was also, I think, it will be blasphemous to say all that, but then
In the
he did
good
not
books.
read any, yeah, in the good books of the British. So you did not want to malign yourself, saying, okay, you will also be put under surveillance. That that you're being going and meeting a seditionist. So he writes all nice letters saying, you're the only person who has understood that the Varnashram system is that the root cause. Removing the Varnashram system is most important to eliminate the caste system. Whereas at the same time, Gandhi was saying that I don't believe that the caste system is odious. I believe in the Varnashram system, which is the bedrock of Hindu society. You remove that and Hindu society will collapse. Everybody cannot become a viceroy and a prime minister. You should be born, inborn traits of leadership and all that have to come hereditarily and all that. So Ambedkar and Savarkar's views had so much of consonance with each other. But till the time he came out of Ratnagiri, the two never met. But after that, they met. And in fact, later, I also say that while Ambedkar was the law minister, he even calls Kopatkar, who was Savarkar's lawyer, and says, your client is being framed by the topmost echelons of power in the Gandhi murder case. There is no case against him. So there's a whole description of how that happens. Bopatkar gets a call from Ambedkar and says, meet me somewhere. Ambedkar himself is driving the car. He picks him up somewhere, and in the car he tells, he gives him some papers and also says that this is a frame-up case. There is no case against your client. Be rest assured, I think he will come out because the prosecution is not able to find a convincing case against him. So later on, they become, they reconcile with each other. But during the Ratnagiri years, there's no interaction.
But even later, so to speak, there is no partnership, or there is no, bringing the forces together. There is no working
Savarkar
together.
all the time used to vouch and advocate, even when Ambedkar was included in the Viceroy's Council and so on. He would always write articles and give statements saying, I applaud the fact that among all people, Ambedkar is there, because we need someone as erudite as him and someone who represents the depressed classes and all that. So, but then the reverse was never, there.
So from this time onwards, once he gets released, till the transfer of power, till India gets dominion status in 1947, how does Savarkar's political space get divided between working for Hindutva and driving the British out? I mean, how does he split? And he gets, definitely what we see as years go by in the 40s, he has softened his stance towards the Britishers. I mean, it's no more, he doesn't have that revolutionary fervor which was visible in 1909-10, up to 1909-10, or even maybe later. So that has softened, that has mellowed. He's a different person. So what is this trajectory? What was the Savarkar of 1940? How was that so different from the Savarkar of say 1910? How did this change happen?
I think Chandrachud, the condition of India also was so different. By what it was in 1910 to by 1935, when the Government of India Act, by 37 you had elections, and Congress was sharing power with the British in so many provinces, 8 out of 11 after the elections, where you had a British governor and you had a Congress ministry. And it was less of a fight, and I think more of negotiations, right? From what the records talk to me, I mean, after
agree, that was Congress's position. Congress was negotiating. Only a very small, insignificant part of the Congress and the revolutionary groups were keen to push the British out, but otherwise Congress was on negotiation, path of negotiation.
Correct. So so he takes up the presidentship. So he's, in fact, the Congress want him as to join their party, including there are eulogizing messages from Gandhi, from Nehru, not from Gandhi though, from Nehru, from Subhash Bose, from Rajgopalachari, all of them, when he's released in 1937, they almost thought it's a foregone conclusion that he will join the Congress. But then he says the Congress has gone way too far in its policy of Muslim appeasement, and so I would rather be in the last row of the patriots than in the first row of traitors. And the appeasement that it is doing is akin to treachery. And so I rather take over the Hindu Mahasabha, which was till then not even a political party. It was like a umbrella organization, dual membership. Some people were members of the Congress. So to make it a fighting fit force, a party that also won elections, came among the triumvirate. Muslim League and Congress were only counted. Now Hindu Mahasabha also started coming in. So one of the key focuses was we also want a seat at the table, at the negotiation table with the Viceroy. And so there again, I would put the strategy that Savarkar and his predecessor B.S. Munjay of the Hindu Mahasabha did was to play this Jekyll and Hyde. So on the one hand, you were trying to ingratiate yourself to the British and say we are the representatives of the Hindu voice, not just the Congress. They are pseudo Hindus, and so we are equally the voice. So we would want to find a place on the negotiation table so that we can lobby for our cause. But at the same time, they were also having secret meetings with the opponents of the British, particularly during the war years, with Germany, with Japan, with Italy. So Munjay, during the roundtable conference, he goes to London. From there, he goes to Italy. He also meets Mussolini, and he is so inspired by this whole Boy Scouts and all of that Mussolini has, and he wants to make model the RSS on the same lines, because he says we need to arm ourselves. I think by then 2 decades of ahimsa and all of that had made, which was only the medicine given to the Hindu community, ahimsa and so on.
Yeah.
So the militarization drive that the Hindu Mahasabha went for, I think it had multiple objectives. One was, yeah, on the positive, you're telling the British that we are going to support you in your war efforts by getting more and more people into it. But the other important thing was also the three objectives. The second was to follow the same 1857 model, that you have a lot of your people, then seduce your soldiers to patriotism, form another army, or give the feeder circuit to the army that was to form later, and that would fight the British out. The third important, the communal element, which in fact even Ambedkar mentions in his this one, right, in his book, where he says by the time of the World War, about 60 to 70% of the British Indian Army was composed of Muslims, which was earlier 30 or 40. It's almost doubled. And Ambedkar himself writes that we cannot, these people are called the gatekeepers of our borders. Can we really trust the loyalty of these people who, if their co-religionists attack us from Afghanistan, will they not open the gate? Is this not something that the Hindu community should look up with alarm? Because by then, it was a question of when, not if, that the British would leave. So when they would leave, there would be a civil war between the two major communities. One community is fully armed. They have a majority in the army. The other community has been made totally pusillanimous, totally emasculated, saying we do not believe in arms and ammunitions. We will only carry on peaceful marches. So then obviously that community will be at a disadvantage. So arm yourself in such a way that you can, for your self-defense. So while throwing the British out was also one of the important objectives, the other objective of the militarization was this as well. And I think here I should, if you allow me, I will just, because the point of at where Raj Bihari Bose and Savarkar come in touch on 18th of November 1937, barely a few months after he becomes the president of the Hindu Mahasabha in Dadar, he gives a speech where he says, referring to the cult of non-violence, he said that although it is a very nice and holy one, but it is of no avail when it is opposed by violence. For the liberation of India from British rule, only an armed conflict could effect any tangible results. The Hindus must eschew this non-violent path which emasculates them and instead fight themselves fit for the defense of India against foreign invasions. Whether one liked it or not, an army is absolutely necessary for protecting our country. Nations gain respect with guns, and peace cannot exist without guns. He called for a rallying of international help and pro-Indian sentiment, where the goal of independence had to be much more important than ideology. So there's fascism, there's that. It doesn't matter. Whoever is your friend, just befriend them. First, the country needs to be strong to be independent. He argued that it is not important whether Japan, which conquers China, is right or wrong. The world cares of its own countries, and India must not count on help from any other country. He believed the people had the right to possess arms for self-defense. So all this speech was happening in Bombay in November 1937. One person in the audience, Mr. Deshpande, who he is a resident of Japan, he takes up notes about this speech and gives it to Raj Bihari Bose. And just a month later, Raj Bihari Bose writes to Savarkar on 29th December 1937. That's the first time the two formally connect. And he says this, and I quote Raj Bihari Bose, the speech that you gave at Dadar on the current political climate of the country, which got published in Kesari, was read to me by a Marathi speaking colleague of mine, as I do not speak Marathi. On reading your speech, I'm of the firm view that India needs a leader like you today. Your knowledge and understanding on geopolitics is profound, and I hope India produces more leaders like you. As for the Congress, they are doing the same things they were doing 20 years ago. I do not think India can ever achieve independence through the Congress methods. I fear that the Congress leadership is playing into the hands of the British. knowingly or otherwise, they seem to have strengthened the position of the British government in India. I was delighted by your criticism and rebuttal of the Congress ideas and politics. This gives me hope and fills me with great excitement. I hope that you will create a group of true patriots and continue this great national work with full responsibility. Unquote. So this was the first time these two gentlemen come together, and after that it's an unending chain of lots of communication between them. There's lots
See,
of
that's
British
very strange,
intelligence
actually. You know,
reports.
it's a brilliant coincidence. It's a
Yeah,
brilliant coincidence that so Savarkar's speech is in November 1937, and barely a month later, Rashbari Bose writes to him,
yeah,
and 1938 March,
yeah,
when Subhash Bose speaks at Haripur as the president, as a Rashtrapati, he talks the same language and he justifies. Nobody has actually noticed, or I don't know how many people have noticed it. He actually gives the philosophical basis of collaborating with foreign powers, and he says
yeah,
it doesn't matter what they are doing internally, whether it's a fascist power or a Nazi
yeah,
or a whoever, whatever they're doing inside their country is their business. What matters to
yeah,
us is our interest. And he enunciates that principle in just with as much clarity as you read out from Savarkar's speech. So it's a very nice coincidence that within that short time span, three people are thinking in the similar lines.
similar way.
And
And Rashbihari Bose obviously takes permission from Savarkar and forms a Hindu Mahasabha chapter in Japan. And the in 1930, 38, 39, where and all the literature, he says, please send all your books, the 1857 book, which is translated into Japanese and other languages, and also the book on Hindutva. And so there's a branch of the Hindu Mahasabha in Japan which is established by Rashbihari Bose. And Savarkar says, yeah, you can do it, but that chapter has to be subservient to the Indian office. It can't have its own agenda and its own party programs and all that. It's a branch of foreign branch of our main organization. So, and
there is the other point on the ideological basis, ideological issue. It is often alleged, accused. Savarkar is accused of having admiration or sympathy for the Nazis and for the fascist powers, for Hitler, for Mussolini, that he had soft corners, if not admiration for them. How much truth is there in that kind of?
no, so in all his speeches as the president of the Hindu Mahasabha, the same thing that you mentioned for Netaji, saying that we really should not care what isms are there. I mean, Nehru is saying that Churchill is fighting for the cause of democracy in the world. But is Churchill great? He's causing the famine for millions in Bengal. So should we support him, or should be so?
No,
So there are
I
so
agree with
many.
that point. I get
Yeah.
that point. But did
So
he ever
yeah.
explicitly support saying that what Hitler is doing is good and it is something that we should try to emulate in our country?
Yes. No, in till the time the whole idea of the Holocaust came out, as I mentioned earlier, even Munje, right in 1931, 32, went to Italy, met Mussolini, wanted to, structure the RSS as a Boy Scouts, which is trained militarily. All of that was there, but and they were valorizing this whole thing that this is the Axis powers are the anti-imperialist forces which are fighting, and Japan, of course, looking at Pan-Asianism and all of that, and it's the Asian century and how all of that. So that sort of admiration for them standing up against colonial powers was certainly there, and this whole idea that you don't dictate to Germany what they should do. I mean, if Hitler is the best thing for them, let them do it. You are a slave country yourself. First, you find independence for yourself. Then you dictate. Should Germany should have this form of government and that form of government? पहले अपना बचा लो घर में जो हालत है. But after the Holocaust, there has been no valorization of the Nazi movement and so on. So, but one more point, I'm sure you would have come across this lady in your research, Savitri Devi. This very fascinating French
Mm.
woman who was, I think, of Greek English kind of origin, and then she's so fascinated by Hinduism and Aryan supremacy.
Yeah.
She's a worshipper of Hitler, so to say. He's like the avatar of Vishnu and all of
She
that. The
married a
same.
Bengali.
She married a Bengali, Asit
Married a
Kumar
Bengali guy.
Mukherjee in Calcutta. and they, right from 39 to 42, 44, there are lots of letter exchanges between Savitri Devi and Mukherjee and the Savarkar brothers. In fact, Savitri Devi writes a book called The Warning to the Hindus or something, and then to that there's the preface is written by Baba Rao Savarkar. The
Acha.
claim that Mukherjee did was, and both Mukherjee as well as Savitri Devi were working as underground Nazi double agents in Calcutta, and on the ostensibly working for the British government, but carrying away all secrets to the Nazis. And they got in touch with Netaji, and it is said that they were the ones who implored him to go and meet Savarkar in 1940 in June at his house, where he came to ask for support for the forward bloc's, civil disobedience and all of that. But then later he was supposed to have made to change his mind, saying, please don't do all this civil disobedience. Isse kuch nahi hoga. Please try to do something like this. And these two, Savitri Devi and her husband, are supposed to have put him in touch with the Nazis and Hitler
I see.
and for him to go there. So that was a nugget that I, accidentally got out, but I don't know. These are all underground moments. There's no documented proof that Savitri Devi on one day went and told him that let's help you out with this. But you see the connections between all of them, how nicely they all fall in place, the puzzle. That they were all these people who were trying as interlocutors. There, Sachindranath Sanyal is introducing Savarkar to Rash Bihari Bose. Savitri Devi and her husband are bringing Savarkar and Netaji together. Then he goes away and makes common cause with Rash Bihari Bose himself. So somewhere all the things fall into place.
Yeah, true.
Connect the dots. Yeah.
Actually, Netaji's connection with the Nazis was one of the reasons for his fallout with Gandhiji.
Yeah.
A trade commissioner, a Nazi trade commissioner who was situated in Bombay. The story goes that Subhash Bose met him in disguise. And he was tracked by the British spies who reported to Ken Munshi, right, Anuj? Ken Munshi, yes. Ken Munshi, who was the minister in the Bombay
Minister of Home Minister in the Bombay
government.
government.
And Munshi went and reported to Gandhi. Munshi went and
He was a
reported it to
conduit. He did
Gandhi,
not
saying
report
that
once. He
Subhash
was a
is.
conduit. He used to do it. The system arrangement was like this: that the IB would show reports to Munshi, and Munshi will show to Mahatma Gandhi. So he was a conduit. And Gandhiji will.
Well,
keep
I
things
haven't
secret
released the.
from
I
him.
haven't released the photo. I haven't released the photo. I have got a fantastic photograph from an old newspaper where I see that Subhash Bose is giving a speech in Bombay during his forward bloc years, and just beside his podium, there are several desks and chairs kept where IB officers are sitting and taking notes, and they are identified. This is a press photograph
I see.
and published prominently that Subhash Bose, how the government is tracking Subhash Bose. Hopefully someday we will bring it out, but that is the most irrefutable evidence you can have of surveillance, and it's an amazing picture. So, I'll come back to Savarkar and Subhash's connection. An interesting anecdote which I got from a relatively unknown biography of Trailokanath Chakraborty Maharaj, as he was known. That towards the very end of his stay in India, Subhash sent out several of his very close contacts all over India to bring together the most prominent extremist individuals. And among them were people like Savarkar and Bhai Paramanand, those.
Ganesh also.
Yes, Savarkar brothers.
Yeah.
So Trailokanath actually was very close to Subhas, and Subhas and Trailokanath had spent considerable amount of time together in Mandalay jail in 1924-25. And since that time, they had known each other very well and very closely. So Trailokanath went and met the Savarkar brothers and gave them the idea. The idea was to repeat what was planned in 1914-15 by Rash Bihari and Jatin Mukherjee, M.N. Roy, to infiltrate the Indian army, bring them over to our side, and cause the rebellion and start the rebellion on a date or something. something happened. That arrangement did not work out. The Savarkar brothers gave the feedback that they are not ready for such a plan. So we don't have much more details, only very sketchy details. But this is given by a very close associate of Trilokanath. So we know that something like this happened. Bhai Paramanand also said something similar on the similar lines. They were not ready for this. So the Hindu Mahasabha, former revolutionaries, they stepped back from this plan. And I don't know whether the Subhas Savarkar meeting happened prior to this or after that. And the interesting thing is that although this story of Subhas getting the idea or Savarkar suggesting to Subhas that he should look beyond India to raise forces, that story was floating, but we have never seen any concrete evidence for it. There is no documentation, or there is nobody who has put it down in his memoirs. There are always floating suggestive sentences. We get that confirmation from Gumnami Baba, where he writes in one of his letters that I got this idea from Savarkar. Savarkar gave me the idea. So Savarkar might not have told him to do the way Savarkar's fans put it, that Savarkar told Netaji to go, so Netaji went. It might not have worked like that, but that theme must have come up. So Bhagwanji Gumnami Baba says that he brought up that idea. I had that idea from him. So
that's
an indirect.
Corroborated by Savarkar's secretary, Balarao Savarkar. I think for Raj Bihari's some birth anniversary, something in 1954, there is a letter which he writes. It may be mentioned here that it was at a private and personal meeting between Netaji Subhash Babu and Savarkarji at Savarkar Sadan, Bombay, that a definitive suggestion was made to Subhash Babu by Savarkarji that he should try to leave India and undertake the risk of going over to Germany to organize the Indian forces there, fallen in German hands as captives, and then with the German help should proceed to Japan to join hands with Sri Raj Bihari Bose. To impress this point, Savarkarji showed to Subhash Babu letters from Sri Bose, that is Raj Bihari Bose, to Savarkarji, written just on the eve of the Japanese declaration of war. And then, of course, when he goes there, Savarkar issues this statement saying, "May the gratitude, sympathy, and good wishes of an entire nation be a source of never failing solace and inspiration to him wherever he happens to be. Wherever he happens to be, I have no doubt he will continue to contribute his all, even his health and life, to the cause of Indian freedom." So that was, it's a difficult thing to conjecture what they said and what they discussed and so on because of the secretiveness of the whole.
Proper record तो मिलेगा नहीं वहाँ से जब तक unless proper. The closest to proper record we come to is what Gumnami Baba said.
Yes.
So the only problem.
See, this is the statement which Savarkar gave after Subhash Bose left.
Oh, it's the same thing that I just read out. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, exactly the same thing. And this statement was given in February 1941.
Just a month after he.
Yeah.
So in fact,
But this proves this proves the point what Vikram was making just now, that Savarkar did not let go of these activities. He was doing directly, indirectly. It's a big deal for somebody to say something in support of Subhash Chandra Bose in 1941, make such a statement. I think nobody else in Congress made a statement.
Nobody else. No. Congress was misbothered. Congress was misbothered.
So if he was openly making this kind of statement, obviously he was doing something or the other.
Correct. So, for instance, there were two. There was one German, there was one Italian, and the British. This I'm quoting from the British intelligence report, where Savarkar's articles and speeches were actually printed in the German press, including the Volkischer Beobachter. And there were two gentlemen. One is called I can't pronounce this, Lesizinski, who was in Apollo Bandar in Bombay, who was the head of commerce branch of NSDAP Bombay, in charge of the German India Institute, which publishes monthly reports on the commercial situation in India. He has a good knowledge. This is from the intelligence report I am quoting. Has a good knowledge of commercial, economic, and political matters of India. He is in regular touch with Mr. Savarkar, president of Hindu Mahasabha, whose note on President Roosevelt he cabled to German news agency and sent a copy to Hitler as well. Now, Savarkar's articles and also a copy of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, has been sent to Mr. Savarkar. So this is what the British intelligence report dated 1938, 1938, 39 talks about. So they were constantly, I think, somewhere in touch. It was not as if, so that's the Jekyll and Hyde thing I mentioned. On the one hand,
Yeah.
you're saying we will help you in the war, but that was not to help them, but to help yourself, to arm yourself, and to give the feeder circuit to the INA, and to arm the Hindus against civil war. And on the undercurrent, you were constantly liaising with the Axis powers, whether it was Germany, Italy, or Japan, through all these double agents.
I mean, on this note, I'll just like to clear one misconception, which is spread, which is so widespread now, courtesy misquote by Dhananjay Keer, where in one writing about Subhash Bose, he says that from East Asia, Subhash Bose said that uh, when the Congress is opposing
Yeah,
the British, look at Savarkar, he is helping the Britishers by sending Hindu soldiers and military.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that Subhash Bose never said. I don't know where Dhananjay Ki got it from, but I have never come across, and it is so much against the grain of Netaji's
Yeah.
speeches of that time
True,
that it
true.
cannot have come from him.
And it's not even found in that list of all his broadcasts, because I also searched for this
No, no,
list
it's not
everywhere.
it's
It's
not there in
not
the list
there.
of broadcasts.
Yeah, yeah.
I have thoroughly checked
It's
all these.
not possible because the वहाँ नेताजी के पास में जो सिस्टम उनके पास में था IAL का इंडिपेंडेंस लीग का,
हाँ,
और उनके पास में कोई जो सोल्जर्स थे उसमें से 70% मुस्लिम्स थे, वो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जिसमें वो लड़ाई कर रहे थे वो ये चीज़ फिट नहीं थी, ये उनकी लैंग्वेज
हाँ,
हो ही नहीं सकती उस टाइम पे। उनको
हाँ,
लोगों को सर्कमस्टेंसेस और टाइम को देखना चाहिए कि वो जिस
that is
जगह में थे,
amazing.
जिस सर्कमस्टेंसेस में थे, उसके हिसाब से उनकी स्टेटमेंट आया करती थी।
हाँ,
एंड लाइफ इज कॉम्प्लेक्स, इज नॉट लीनियर थिंग ना, कि यही करेंगे ऐसे करेंगे।
हाँ, हाँ.
कि सावरकर is saying something, and of course he's also meeting Germans, so that by itself that shows he was not he had gone back on his word, so to speak.
Correct. But Savarkar of this time was, I think, the biggest drawback was also that I don't think he was a great leader in terms of keeping his own party together. They were initially they were all working together, but then the intra-party feuds, especially between there was a Shama Prasad Mukherjee faction, there was a Savarkar faction, Maharashtra versus Bengal, and all these others. Most of the the Hindu Mahasabha was also funded by all these Rajas and Zamindars.
I mean, I'm tempted to tell you something, because there was a Pandit, this Jyoti Shankar Dikshit. He was, of course, backing Savarkar. He was in UP. Now, story goes, Chandrachud knows better, when this so-called Gumnami Baba entered India, Jyoti Shankar Dikshit was one of the first leaders to have met him, and he recognized him as Subhash Bose. But that's all we know. We do not know what happened beyond that. But initial
There is
phase,
too much underground activity, too much of underground activity to be certain of something. But yeah, coming back to the faction, I mean the fight and all, which is actually a good democratic process we get from Hindu Mahasabha, is that I read that 1941 the presidentship of Hindu Mahasabha was decided by a direct contest between Savarkar and Bhai Paramanand. So at least they were fighting it out at the top, not being nominated for multiple
He
years.
was constantly saying, I'm going to resign. His health was so bad. By 45, 46, he had 2 heart attacks. He had almost died. And the long years of incarceration in jail, it had totally, he had arthritis. His bones had all gone very bad. He could not eat. His digestive system too was completely, only a lot of bland, spiceless food and that kind of thing that he was eating. So his health was always a cause of concern. And despite that, the extensive touring that he did as a president of the Hindu Mahasabha to get for the election campaigns and all of that, that took a further toll. And a lot of flip-flops. He promised a direct action against the British as an ultimatum post just before the Cripps mission came in and so on. But then Cripps mission came, and then the Quit India movement, all that happened. And so then he postponed. The Hindu Mahasabha was fully, they had done this whole movement in Hyderabad against the Nizam for the Hindu civil rights of the Hindus. That was a huge success. The Nizam had to climb down and give equal representation, 50% representation to the Hindus, which I mean, they were almost 80% of the population, but still they were getting hardly 10% of all the positions in power and so on, and the minority was getting much more. So the huge campaign that the Hindu Mahasabha undertook in Hyderabad, that had put this whole, agitationist, this one into the Mahasabha. But so they were very gung-ho that, we should do a direct action and hit the British where it hurts the most. All those speeches he made, economic boycott, if you do that, that is where they will go, because just talking about satyagrahas and all that won't work. But when the time came to actually implement it, for various reasons, he took it back and said we will stagger it, and that created a lot of conflict with Shama Prasad Mukherjee, who wanted to almost replicate the Congress style of agitation. In fact, Gandhi himself had said Patel is more of a Hindu Mahasabha leader in our Congress, and Shama Prasad is a Congress leader in the Mahasabha. So, so which is why I think Mukherjee was the one who was most amenable to also enter Nehru's cabinet from the Mahasabha side, because he had a lot of affiliation for the Congress style of functioning, and he wanted to have this mass movement, mass agitations, which Savarkar did not, for various reasons, get into, and that caused, I think, at that point where it was a delicate thing that they were actually sitting with the viceroy for negotiations, and by then all the Congress leaders were in jail after Quit India for 2 years. So then it was directly the Hindu Mahasabha and the Muslim League who were in negotiation with the viceroy. So at that point, to also do a mass agitation, Savarkar felt was not a right thing, but Mukherjee disagreed. So all these things he could not sort out as a leader, and that led to the eventual unraveling of the Mahasabha, whereby 46 elections they got completely wiped out. They hardly won 2 or 3 seats, and the party never recovered after that. And particularly after Gandhi's murder and all that, then Mukherjee had to form his own Jansangh and get out of the Mahasabha.
Why did this final break happen? Why did Mukherjee have to go towards the Jansangh route, and Savarkar stays aloof?
Savarkar by then anyway had almost left politics, and he during the Liaquat Pact time, Nehru Liaquat Pact, when the whole freedom of expression of every opposition leader was clamped, all of the mass arrests of everybody, including Savarkar, who had not even uttered a word about this pact. At that time, the release conditions was, I'm going to leave politics forever, and he said, okay, I'm fed up anyway. By then, you've also had the Gandhi murder trial and you've come out of it, so I don't want to get into politics. But in those 2 years that Shama Prasad Mukherjee was in the Nehru cabinet, I write in my book, the letters that Nehru and Patel kept on writing to Shama Prasad Mukherjee. He had to bear the albatross of the Hindu Mahasabha sins, so to say, saying, they are making such vituperative statements against Gandhi, so can you control them? You are a minister. It is so embarrassing to have a minister, doing this. And they are raising a fund for Savarkar's defense. Someone who's accused in the murder, how can Hindu Mahasabha and you as a minister who's from the same party? So constantly Mukherjee was, facing the ire of all of this, but he was telling, I mean, thousands and thousands, 25,000, 30,000 RSS workers just rounded up, women also in the wake of Gandhi's murder. So he was also saying, why don't you release all of them? This is the largest detention anyone has done of people totally unrelated to the crime. And for months together with no charges on them, you snoop on everybody and then put everyone in jail, the first act post-independence. So all of that also led to, he must have thought I've had enough of this, so let me leave the Mahasabha. Anyway, it is a dying party, and form my own Jansangh.
So I find a very strange similarity between on the left and on the right. On the left being Jayaprakash Narayan, and on the right being Savarkar.
Yeah.
Two individuals with huge potential and promise,
Yeah.
finally fizzling out after 1947 without contributing much to the development of the country. I mean, Savarkar lived till 1966, 2 decades. That's a pretty long time. Although he was ill, he was not well, and there were controversies. But somehow I feel that it was not done to be sitting passively without somehow contributing more actively into the development of the country. So
But
that
that
comes
was
as
the
a kind of a disappointment.
the political space of the time where I don't think Nehru's government wanted any semblance of an
That's probably
opposition
the only
party.
difference, that Nehru wanted Jayaprakash Narayan to enter the political
Ah,
space, whereas he himself was reluctant. But that desire to let this person come into the political space was not there for Savarkar. So he was
political
stopped.
space political space is a big thing. In fact, I quote, in 1957 there was the centenary of the 1857 war, and in Delhi a huge this one was held at Red Fort with all the people associated with the revolutionary movement right from 1900s. Everyone was felicitated, and Savarkar, because he had written the book on 1857, he was invited to preside over it, and the members of the committee go and invite Nehru to as a prime minister. It's such a great occasion. So he looks at the this one and says, okay, Savarkar is presiding over this event. I don't think I would be able to make it. And this is a documented letter which I quote in this one, that we all read as students. We had read his 1857 book. Oh, it was full of valor. It was full of a lot of nice things. But that's not true history. It's all a lot of fiction. To share a stage with
Seriously?
him,
He wrote it
yeah,
down on a letter?
yeah, the people who went and met Nehru have documented that, saying this is what he
Wow.
said. And he said, some other day, not on that day when he's there, some other day I will come and talk about it, or there are other occasions as the Prime Minister of India I can talk about, but I will not share stage with him. So participation in politics is a big thing. Even sharing stage with him in a event to celebrate the centenary of 1857 was not something that Nehru was willing to do. So that was the amount of antipathy for him that he had.
Well, we have been talking for nearly 2 hours. That's,
Are
I
there
mean, there
anyone
is
other than
still.
the three of us?
No, no, there are a lot of people actually listening.
Oh
There are a
my
lot of
God,
people who are
okay.
listening, and they are asking questions. There are questions also, but they are asking questions about something which I don't want to get into the detail at this time of night. Is about you can very well guess it. Is Savarkar's role in is alleged role in Gandhi's murder, where he was acquitted due to lack of evidence by the initial investigation, but later the Kapoor Commission probably tried to indict him or something, which again the left intellectuals, the intelligentsia, play it up in a very big way, say that had Savarkar been alive, he would have been sent to jail. So I mean, if you can just touch upon this thing, are you dealing with this in your second volume?
Yes, yes, fully. In fact, there are 11,100 pages of the Gandhi murder trial that I have assiduously gone through, every little bit, including some horoscope. Everything has been put into that file of the Gandhi murder. Another 5,000 pages of the Kapoor Commission report, and the entire edifice of the prosecution's case was based on the evidence, so to say, of a police approver, which was this guy called Digambar Badge, who, I mean, what was the construct? Of course, Godse and Apte were close to Savarkar in the Hindu Mahasabha. They were members of the Hindu Mahasabha. Godse had also served as Savarkar's secretary while he was in Ratnagiri. He literally worshipped him as a god. And then Savarkar and the RSS kind of had their differences of opinion, especially with Golwalkar coming into picture. Savarkar wanted to have their own Boy Scouts within the Hindu Mahasabha, and that was the Hindu Rashtra Dal. And Godse and Apte were very prominent members of that. But all of this is 1942, 44. So even, they were having a newspaper called Agrani, where when Gandhi is going to the negotiations with Jinnah, Godse and Apte, protest against him in Panchgani, and that becomes the top. This one saying he was heckled, he was shown black flags and all of that. But as so Badge's confession as an approver, one of the 9 people who were accused, this Badge, he was the one who said this whole thing, that they went to his house, they met him. I was also there, but then he said, "Yashasvi ho ya," or be successful and come back. Some dramatize it further that he gave the gun into their hands and all of that, which is completely untrue. The gun was procured from Gwalior by this man called Dr. Parchure, who was the Hindu Mahasabha president in Gwalior. So there was a lot of involvement of a lot of people from the Hindu Mahasabha, but for any of them to actually pin it down to say that Savarkar was a mastermind of that was impossible, other than this particular confession by Badge that we met. But all the other people in the group, they disagreed with that, saying we never met, including Godse. Godse, in his testimony and his dying declaration, says, we were getting disillusioned with Savarkar towards as freedom was approaching because he was becoming pacifist. We went and disrupted one of Gandhiji's speeches, and he chided us for that. Gandhiji was going and reading verses of the Quran in a mandir, and we wanted to go and tell him, can you do the same thing of reading Hanuman Chalisa in a temple, in a mosque? For that also, Savarkar chided us. Then he went and hoisted the tricolor on his house when we all opposed it because we wanted the Bhagwat Dhwaj, and the vivisected country was what it represented. He allowed Shama Prasad Mukherjee to join the Nehru's government because he said, now that the fight with the British is over, we should all come together and it's time for nation building. And he was becoming conciliatory with the Congress and Gandhi, and we decided to break ranks from him. And all the old folks, whether it was Savarkar or Munje, they were of no use anymore to the Hindu cause. So we decided to chart our own path. And so we never discussed the whole idea of the murder or anything with him at all. The interesting part, Chandrachud, is that the whole this rookie gang of murderers, they did not even have a plan to kill Gandhi till about 12th of January 1948. Can we beat that? I mean, till then they wanted to do something for this country, retribution. They had all kinds of silly, fantastical plans that we should go to Pakistan assembly and bomb the assembly when the whole assembly is in session, kill Jinnah, kill the entire
My
Pakistani.
God.
How would you do that? How would you procure arms, go cross the border? Those details were not necessary. You just had to do something heroic. Then the thing comes, oh, that's very difficult to cross the border, so we will loot the Nizam's treasury because the Nizam is very much close to Pakistan and he may secede from India. So we will cripple the Nizam. So Hyderabad state anyway comes next to Maharashtra. So we will sit at the border when the treasury vans are going, like the Kakori case, we will cripple the Nizam. So these were the plans that Godse and Apte were doing till as late as 12th January. And on 12th January, when this news that Gandhi is going on a fast to death, so that those 55 crores are given to Pakistan, when at the time when Kashmir was facing invasions and refugee problem was all over the place, that was when they get incensed. Then they find a new victim to catch, saying, forget Nizam, forget Pakistan, isko maar dete, isko goli maar dete. So between 12th and 28th, in those 2 weeks, they made all kinds of silly, foolish, rookie attempts. It's actually a comedy of errors. Sadly, in a very perverse manner, they take some gun till that morning. They don't even practice it. Then the cartridge is not fitting into it. 2 hours before the first attempt they did on 20th of January, they don't even know whether the cartridge will go into the thing. They're practicing in some grounds in Delhi. They fail miserably. Madanlal Pahwa, one of the fellows who's the part of the plot, he throws the bomb, but then the gun doesn't shoot. And so Gandhi survives. But between 20th and 28th of January, the government of India, the Delhi police, the Bombay police had full 8 days or a week to safeguard Gandhi's life if they wanted to. But then it was not done. And the
And 9 hours to Rama
police.
is still banned in our country.
Correct. And in detail, I talk about this whole lapses on the part of the Delhi police, the Bombay police, the Nagarwala, who was the commissioner in Bombay, and how the intelligence bureau, some intelligence guys asked by the Delhi police to go directly to Bombay, meet him, and give him this file because Pahwa is already caught. He knows about Godse and Apte. Now, this guy, instead of going directly to Bombay, if it's such an urgent matter, he takes a train, goes all the way to Allahabad. There is a Kumbh Mela happening there. He goes and takes Shahi Snan. Aram se he comes, and the report actually reaches Nagarwala's table on the morning of 30th January, by which evening he is murdered. So there are lots of, so in these 16 days, the fact that Savarkar sat and masterminded this whole plot, etc., etc. That is a little too fantastic to believe, because and the details I can't get into that. The book will anyway
Of
cover
course, I
it
mean,
more.
yeah. I mean,
But
that's. I mean, it will take up probably a day to discuss the details there. But as
correct.
100 people are still watching this show at 12 o'clock at midnight, my
Oh
last
my God.
blunt question to you, my last blunt question, direct question to you is: in your reading, in your understanding, do you think that Savarkar might have sensed that something like this was going to happen?
In terms of assassination of
Of
Gandhi,
assassination, yes.
I don't think so. I don't
You
think
don't
so.
think so?
I don't think so. But he knew that once it happened, that he was going to be framed, was something that he knew. In fact, even when the police came to just conduct a raid, he said, "Have you come to arrest me for Gandhi's murder?" And that happened, I think, 1 week after, by the first week of February 1948 or so. So, but I don't think he had almost become a recluse by then. Half of it was also because of the health conditions and the heart attack that he had and all that, and he had kind of lost interest in politics, by and large. So I do not think, from the reading of
Did he
whatever,
ever give any statement condemning or
yes,
criticizing or
yes,
saying that it was
yeah.
not
In fact, just
a
after
civilized thing
Gandhi's
to do?
death, yeah, just on the next morning, there is a press statement from him saying this is the most dastardly act and it should not have been done and all of that. So that he issued just the next morning of the murder, 31st of Jan. So, but then, yeah, even the Kapoor Commission, the way that Kapoor Commission itself got constituted was so fallacious, because in 1964, Godse and Apte were hanged. The other chaps, Gopal Godse, who was the brother of Nathuram, and this guy called Karkare and all of them, they were still in prison. They were released in 64. And at that time, a felicitation was held in their honor in Pune. And this man, who's the head of Kesari, the grandson of Tilak, called this G.V. Ketkar, he got into a flourish while talking in a public meeting, said, "I knew about Gandhi's murder and Godse had told me about it. And so, that I had advised him not to." And Gopal Godse is telling him, "Can you shut up? I mean, you're just talking nonsense." And he said, "You keep quiet. Nobody will arrest me now. It's an independent nation." And he goes on and on. I had advised him. Someone else had actually gone and even told Patel, and all sorts of claims Ketkar made. And then that created a furor in the Maharashtra Assembly, in Parliament, and that is why the whole case was reopened. And the investigation of the Kapoor Commission, the terms of reference was just to see, did Ketkar actually know about the Gandhi murder trial, and did he, as he claimed, tell it to the Chief Minister of Maharashtra and also the Home Minister of India? If so, what action did they take? If not, why? So these were the terms of reference of the Kapoor Commission, not to go anywhere to reinvestigate a case that had already been set to rest. And the terms of reference are very clear that these are just the one or two terms that are there. And a commission of inquiry has no right legally to overturn the judgment of
Court's
the trial
judgment.
court's judgment. And in fact, that too. So nowhere in the whole Kapoor Commission report, Justice Kapoor even invites these two people who were, again, they were coerced by the police and their confessions were taken. This guy called Gajanan Damle and Appa Kasar, the secretary and the bodyguard of Savarkar, who under police coercion said, "Ha, we saw these two Godse and Apte coming, and he said this Yashasvi Home, yeah," and all that, in a police confession. But they were never invited to the court as witnesses, either in 1948 Red Fort trial or even by the Kapoor Commission when they were all alive. The chief witnesses, the entire prosecution's argument rested on this edifice, that they had met and he told them, "Be successful and come back." So the eyewitnesses of that were not called either in court by the prosecution or even by Justice Kapoor. But without any this thing, he keeps saying there is a faction of Savarkarites within the Hindu Mahasabha, which was true. I mean, these all, as I said, there were this Maharashtra faction, which was Savarkarite, and the Bengal faction. So the Hindu Rashtra Dal people, the young militant kind of Hindu nationalist people within the Mahasabha, were all these guys, Godse, Apte, and Karkare, all of them. So the which Kapoor all through says the Savarkarite faction within the Mahasabha was the one which was plotting, but towards the end, and that's not even a conclusion of the report, somewhere innocuously one line he mentions, hence it is without any doubt we can say that Savarkar was the man behind this. So there is no, it's not one of the main conclusions of the report. If you don't read it very carefully, you will actually miss this particular line that is inserted somewhere, saying with all circumstantial evidence points without any doubt that Savarkar must have been the brain behind this. Whereas throughout the report, the stress is on the word Savarkarite faction, not him personally. Now, those who owed allegiance to him, later they split from him, or they had him as the ideological mascot. That doesn't. So, in fact, Savarkar in his defense in the trial says, okay, the Gandhians were the one who did the violence in the 1942 Quit India time. So then is Gandhi to be responsible for the violence? So they owed allegiance to his ideology, but the main person, you cannot put him in the thing. But most importantly, which I think again escaped media attention, was as late as now, 2018. In 2016, there was this man called Pankaj Fadnis who put a PIL in the Bombay High Court saying, Savarkar's name has been tarnished. And he had many other parts of the PIL. There were 3 bullets and 4 bullets, all that, those theories of Godse, who was
Swami.
the 4th bullet, where did it PIL, all those, which I don't want to get into that. But the second part of the PIL was that, this Savarkar was unfairly targeted by the commission, and that has tainted his name, and we should erase that and give him a proper. Now, the Bombay High Court dismissed that PIL. But he then went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court sat over it, and amicus curiae was appointed. And after 1.5 years of going through the entire document in 2018,
no evidence,
which was headed by, who was not then but now the Chief Justice of India, Justice Bobde, gave a categorical this thing that nothing in the, first of all, a commission of inquiry cannot overturn a proper judgment of a court. Nothing that the commission has actually said, puts Savarkar as one of the guilty people of the murder. It is not lack of evidence, but there is no evidence. Some people say, oh, there was lack of evidence. There is no evidence to say that there is, he's complicit. So the petitioner's plea that he is tainted and it is removed, that itself is wrong, because he is not tainted. He has been honorably exonerated and acquitted by the court of 1949, and that is what holds above the rest of the thing. So that I thought that kind of should rest the matter, because the highest court of the country also giving repeatedly for our politics. If we keep doing it, then there's no end. But politics is a different.
But then that's politics, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we had just an amazing session, just an amazing 2 hours of discussion. Thank you so much, Vikram.
No, I mean, it's pleasure.
It's so good to have the insights from a person like you, who has researched so deeply for so many years and can explain, articulate, has the breadth of the entire matter and can set it in context. So that helps. We basically wanted to, obviously we have been, now Anuj and I have been firmly put into the camp of Godi media, that we have joined RSS, we are now Godi media, and all those things. But having said that, we want people to start viewing facts as facts, and that any narrative can have multiple facets. It can be viewed from different angles, and not to be, monochromatic on any topic, and that see things as they are, the different possibilities. And this was the ideal case study, and also which has a link with our issue. So we thought that this would be a brilliant place to start with, and without doubt it has been an absolute pleasure to listen to you. And I'm sure everybody will agree. There are still 106 people listening, and
at 12.
Yes.
Thank you to all of them.
And yes,
History at
absolutely. Thank
12
you
is
to all of you for being here, for listening and participating, raising your questions. I hope, I mean, a lot more people will see this video, because the uh, case, as you have argued over the last couple of hours, that clarifies so many issues, so many uh, points of confusion, that this should be circulated widely, and a lot of people, lot more people should actually see it. And hopefully that will happen. So once again, Vikram, thank you very much for being
Thank you.
here and
Thank you very much.
answering the questions. And hopefully we will catch up again.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anuj and Chandru.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, good
Right.
night. Bye.